All right, let's unpack what these sanctions mean and if there are possible avenues for reversal with Waymaker's Global Trade Solutions Director, Thina Nodada, who joins us now then. Thina, thank you so much for the time, but always good chatting to you, man. What do these sanctions ultimately mean for South Africa if they were to come through? Of course, one must add, and I hasten to add this, that there is just a bill that is being passed through the U.S. Committee on Foreign Affairs, and it needs to pass there with majority support in order for this to happen. It also is looking to identify South African government officials and ANC leaders that would be eligible for these sanctions. What would these sanctions mean?
Hi, Arabella. Thank you for having me. No, look, I think it just adds on to what's already existing in terms of the 30% duties that we've got going into the US. If we have the sanctions, then it's going to create an atmosphere where trading with the US, doing business with the US is just more complicated. And even the negotiation processes and how things can happen, bilateral agreements, it just seems compromised at the moment.
Already our relationship is compromised. Prior to this, while the United States is a massive trading partner on a global scale, and of course replacing them is very difficult, we haven't had the kind of relationship with them in terms of trade that perhaps we've had with the likes of China, who we trade a little bit more with, Europe, even the likes of South America and Brazil particularly. So should there be much panic when sanctions then get applied, meaning leaders cannot travel to that country, as you said, trade and the like can't happen?
No, definitely, Arabella, there is need for panic. It's our second biggest trading partner. In order to replace them or to find a new market that can satisfy the supply that South Africa has is going to take time. Especially when you look at the different sectors that are affected, the automotive sector especially, the agriculture sector as well, where we need governments to be making standardization and harmonization processes for trade to actually happen. So the simple thing is people assume that we can just simply say we're going to replace the US, but who do you replace them with? And do we have any trade agreements? Are we allowed to actually export to those markets? And these are the things that we need to look at. The UAE in the Middle East comes up very well. And you've got a good mix of countries, Kuwait, Qatar, Dubai, etc. But to replace your second biggest trading partner is still going to be very difficult, even with that even in the 5-year term.
Yeah, one must say as well that some of the reasoning behind this, members raised issues with South Africa's leaning towards authoritarian regimes in Russia and China and repeatedly aligning with anti-American stances. I mean, does that really make sense that just because we don't have the same values in that sense, that we actually cannot find a way to sit around a table and still formulate trade? Is that where the world has gone? Is the global shift that we've seen in the world over the last 30 or so years, is that beginning to come off a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. But, Arabella, we wouldn't have been members of BRICS for so many years if we weren't also looking at what the East can sort of supply and what it brings for our own country. So it's just a matter of, when I look at it, is to say the US is really looking at ways to take on the world with these tariff wars and sanctions that are being put on. And you can see that South Africa is really trying to appease the US and work with the US in terms of seeing what will happen in the near future and possibly reduce these duties and sanctions that exist. But I think why South Africa is doing this is because they're looking at a medium to long-term view. I think they see that it's not going to be easy to replace it, and to replace the US market, and Trump is not going to be president forever. So if Trump's not going to be president forever, who's coming in next and where do we stand then? And I think that's the stage that we are at the moment. Everything else has been tried, has been explored. We went to the White House, we took Rupert and had other guys there talking about how genocide doesn't exist in South Africa. But at the end of the day, after that, we got hit with 30% tariffs. So I think yes, diversification is important. Looking at other markets, capitalizing on the Africa continental free trade area becomes important. Um, but don't just simply try to replace the US, still try kind of um, not appease them, but work in a way where, from a diplomatic perspective, we don't create a situation where, with or without Trump, we cannot talk to them.
Zimbabwe's president and ZANU-PF leader as well, Emerson Mnangagwa, said, well, there's no need to panic. Don't be worried. Don't be intimidated by Washington with regards to this. What should we take from words like that from a leader whose country has suffered sanctions from the US for many, many years?
No, I mean, look, they've felt it, they've seen it. Um, I think that the media reports what's happening in Zimbabwe and what currently the situation is not exactly purely accurate. So from the agricultural perspective, Zimbabwe still plays a big part in South Africa in terms of imports. But the ease of doing business in the country, the cost of living has significantly increased through the sanctions that come from the US. So I wouldn't want to, given globalization, given the importance of the US, I wouldn't want to follow that stance where it says it doesn't matter. It does
Yeah.
matter at the end of the day. But what we can do is decrease our dependence on them and work more with those that are aligned with our thinking and our values, and we can export to.
Yeah, what kind of negotiations then would help a situation like this? Because, like you mentioned, we've already gone to the United States. President Cyril Ramaphosa took a host of ministers and other prominent people as well, and that seemingly didn't work. So what kind of conversations would work or would change things? Would it just have to be taking a knee and bowing to Donald Trump's every demands here?
Yeah, no, and I think we need to just really look at the value in the see private sector negotiations. So as much as you'll get something like a 30% duties, but the people who are doing business and the people that really feel it are private sector and the consumers. So I think if we can manage that, and I'm not against what Ramaphosa's feelings are to go and sort of appease Trump for now. But I don't foresee that it's going to make any specific difference in the next few years. But it will be key because replacing your second biggest trading partner
Yeah.
is really complicated.
What do you make of South Africa's foreign policy, though, as it currently stands? Should that be re-looked at? I mean, it's not so long ago that we joined China in a military operation drill as well, which, sort of extends or rather pushes us or pulls us away a little bit from Taiwan, for example, too, which is another aspect which is quite critical for the United States. We've got the case, of course, against Israel as well. How should we be looking at our own foreign policy from here, understanding how the world is pretty much working, particularly with Donald Trump still at the helm?
Yeah, no, good question, Arabella. I think we really need to look internally, look at our strengths, and look at which relationships we can really work on. Um, South Africa, in comparison to other countries, does not have a very strong outward mission perspective where we look to work with other countries in terms of increasing trade. So you get these things called, bilateral agreements, even provincial bilateral agreements, and we need to capitalize on these things. And sometimes what will happen is a simple example will be the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where public sector will be informed that, you know, great things are going to happen, more trade's going to happen in Africa because of decreased tariffs. But we also need more harmonization on what we can and what we can't clear and supply into specific countries. And this is the problem where for example, look at our red meat, we can look at our poultry, where most of African countries actually won't accept it. So I would really love to see our government working together with other governments in order to ensure that we have aligned forwarding and clearing processes, which allows for product to leave a country and enter another country without complications. If we had that kind of synergy, more improved synergy on the African continent, especially within East Africa, West Africa, because we kind of have it with SADC. that will see really open up doors and allow private sector to capitalize on our trade agreements that we have.
Yeah, Thina, just as a final question, perhaps we could also help people just understand a little bit more with regards to these tariffs that are set then to come into effect. I believe it's actually the 1st of August 2025, so pretty much the end of this coming week, actually, is when they come into effect. Why don't you just give us a sense of what that actually means for the country? What does it do for pricing? Or what does it do for exports, and how exactly we would suffer from these hikes?
Okay, no, thank you. I mean, essentially what it creates is a situation where your product lands at a higher cost. So it's all about total landed cost. So if a product costs 100 Rand to move from in South Africa, and to when you add the logistics, say it's now 130 Rand, when it arrives in the US, people who are importing that would simply pay the VAT coming in. But now they're going to add 30% over and above that 150 in order for the product to come in. It sounds very simple, and it sounds not too big when you talk about one item and the figures that I've used. But when it gets to the billions in terms of the trade that we do, when it comes to the automotive sector in terms of buying, that 30% makes a massive difference. And it makes a difference in terms of why is it still viable to buy from South Africa. So it's not that South African products won't get into the US, they can, but now they are no longer as competitive and as attractive as they were before. And if the US has any other standing trade agreements with other countries that have not been hit with the 30% duty like we have in South Africa, then private sector is going to gear themselves towards that for survival purposes, for profit purposes, and also for quality purposes. So we are literally hinging on quality of our products and what it brings for the market. But otherwise, it's taken away the competitiveness factor, because AGOA used to give us a 0% duty going into the US. They hit with 30%. So South African products are simply no longer as attractive from a private sector perspective to purchase in US.
So, sorry, and I know I said final question, but yes. So can we just wait 4 years? Can we just wait the 3.5 that's left of Donald Trump's reign and just say, well, we'll wait it out and then we'll get back after this?
Look, we can't ignore it, because when that comes back after 4 or 5 years, it can create massive jobs and massive job opportunities. I don't think that in 5 years, even at our best, we'll be able to replace our second biggest trading partner. That's why it's understandable, and I think that's why the president still prioritizes the US.